All right, time for an update and forecast on the mill fire, which is burning in Plumas and Sierra counties. And maybe that should be the first thing that we do, is just try to show where this fire is. So right around there, you can see Lake Tahoe. And then if you go up to the northwest from there, we have the mill fire. Actually looking at some of the kind of landmarks around here, we have White Hawk down, I want to orient us towards north. That's going to be down towards the southwest of the fire, and then we have Gold Mountain, Cleo Trestle, Nakoma Resort, and then up on the north we have Portola there. And that is one reason I'm a bit concerned about this fire, is we do have a large number of structures around this fire. See all those kind of orange dots? Those are the structures that we're talking about. And one thing is, it was also very active yesterday. I'd say one of the most active wildfires I've seen this entire year. So maybe we'll just start off by looking at some of the visual imagery, and we can actually start with the start of this fire. And found this video that goes along with what the CAL FIRE website was saying here. It says, a thunderstorm in eastern Plumas County around 2 p.m. It says today, but it was actually, I believe, 2 days ago, resulted in 4 dry lightning strikes outside the rain core of the storm that have become wildfires on the Plumas National Forest Beckworth Ranger District. So if we come back here, I actually have the video from when these thunderstorms came through. Keep your eye on the left side of the screen right here. You'll see a little smoke plume begin right there. That's after the dry lightning happened. You can also see what kind of conditions we're dealing with. You have some steep, rugged terrain. It's been very hot, dry, and then even some strong winds as well. And then if you look at the fuels, it looks like there's abundant fuels. And see those white caps? That's something that happened apparently when this fire first started, but then also yesterday. And that, what you'd call that is a pyrocumulus cloud. And the footage from yesterday was actually pretty incredible. I'll pull that up right here. So you can see very active yesterday afternoon. Now something interesting happens here though. This was around 12 to 2 p.m. And usually your peak fire activity is around 3 to 5 p.m. But around 3 o'clock, it actually started to weaken a little bit. You'll see the smoke become, I mean, it still looks pretty intense out there, but certainly not as bad as during the peak of the day yesterday, around 12 to 2 p.m. And I believe the only explanation I have for that is just due to the firefighters that we have and all the great air operations that they were doing yesterday, because normally your peak activity would be around 3 to 5 p.m. So it was interesting, and also some good news that it actually started to calm down a bit yesterday. One other visual I'll show from yesterday, I got to give credit to Francis for this video. It says, I was on a plane to SFO this afternoon, and look at the mill fire from the airplane. You can, that's I think the best view I've ever seen of pyrocumulus clouds right there. And basically what's happening is there's a lot of heat from the fire, and then that's pulling in, or that heat heats up the air, that air becomes less dense, so it rises. And when you have that much heat generating, it's able to rise pretty substantially. Bad part of that is that's when your wildfire can start to create its own weather, where because you have so much rising air, you have winds pushing in from different directions. I also saw one video yesterday on Neil LaRoe's Twitter. I've actually gone to a couple fires with him. Great account to follow on Twitter as well. I guess I should call it X now. But at one point, the column actually looked to be rotating in 2 different directions. There's like 2 separate columns. So yeah, that's what was going on towards the start of this fire yesterday. Very active behavior. Now looking outside right now, it looks like all that smoke has just settled down overnight. What often happens overnight is you get an inversion where the ground cools off faster than the air above it. So then you have cold air below warm air. And you think of that like your salad dressing when you leave it out and it gets all layered. That's kind of what the atmosphere is like in the morning, and it's all just stable because all the air is where it wants to be. That cold air is more dense, so it's down in the valleys. And then what happens in the afternoon is it's almost like shaking up that salad dressing, where the surface starts to heat up a lot more. You get rising air, and then it starts to mix things up. Your winds pick up, and that's very important for fire behavior because, one, it blows some of the smoke out, and then you're able to heat up more. But then also with stronger winds, that's able to push the fire. So right now, it doesn't look too bad out there. If we look at the current heat detections, we're actually not really seeing any heat coming off of this fire at the moment. If we were, we'd be seeing kind of big red or yellow boxes like we were yesterday afternoon. So right off the bat, I would say that's some good news. Where there's maybe some bad news is, again, just how close this fire is to some structures. But yeah, we'll kind of try to dive into the details here. So this is the most recent data that I have to go off of. This is our heat detections. And most of our growth yesterday, I like showing the heat detections because based on the color of those squares, you can see roughly when that heat was detected. So your yellow is going to be older than 24 hours ago. Orange is 12 to 24 hours. And then the red is going to be within the last 12 hours. So it actually looks like most of our recent growth was on the northeastern side of this fire. And that goes along perfectly with what we were talking about yesterday afternoon, where the winds were blowing from the southwest. And when that happens, it's going to try to push the fire towards the northeast. So we'll look at the weather forecast in a moment, but we're going to have southwesterly winds again. So I'm expecting more growth on this northeastern side of the fire. Now, if we look in there, that's actually not where the structures are, though. I would be more worried if we had a directly south wind, because then that would push it straight towards something like Nakoma Resort. Although, Portola is definitely one of the places I'm concerned about with this fire. So southwesterly does kind of push it closer towards Portola. Now, one area of the fire that likes the fact that we have southwesterly winds is down here in White Hawk. You can see how close some of these heat detections got to White Hawk. And at one point, I actually measured from the fire perimeter to some of the structures in White Hawk, and it was, I think, 1,000 feet at one point. But something that really helped us out, you see 89 right there. I don't know if it actually got all the way down to 89. I don't believe it did. We'll look at that on the perimeter in a second. But even if it had, that could have acted as our little fuel break, where it hopefully wouldn't be able to jump over that. But what I was saying is the southwesterly winds work in favor of White Hawk because that's going to act to actually push the fire away from White Hawk, not towards it. For example, a bad wind for White Hawk would be coming from the northeast, but yeah, that doesn't look to be the case. So some other areas on the northern side of this fire, see we have the Nakoma Resort right there. I believe it's a golf resort. And then Portola is going to be up here. So Google Earth's a bit slow recently, so we're actually going to measure it on this map right here. I believe that's going to be Portola. Let's go just perimeter, because perimeter is going to be the most accurate data that we have to go off of. And then let's take our measuring tool, distance to where we see some of those structures. That looks to be about 1.89 miles. And I believe that's where all the new growth was yesterday, that kind of northeastern. That's large enough, I don't think we could actually call that a finger of the fire. But all of that is going to be our new growth from yesterday. Similar conditions today, so without a lot of operations, you can imagine it would do probably the exact same thing and burn up closer towards Portola. Good news is that we do have a lot of firing or wildfire operations on this. Air attack, I believe, in the morning, because the conditions right now are pretty calm out there. I'd be interested to know if they're actually getting some direct attack on the fire at the moment, just to take advantage of some of the cooler, more moist conditions that we had overnight. And we did have a good moisture recovery overnight, which is actually very helpful. You get that moisture back into your fine fuels, so then the fire is not ready to spread as quickly right when the day starts. So there's our fire. One thing I want to point out is that we did have a couple of spot fires yesterday, and I know that was kind of causing some headaches, but from the reports I was able to read, it sounds like they did a great job on those spot fires, making sure that they didn't grow into something much larger. And you can kind of see that was the case when they did this aerial flight of the perimeter, where basically what's happening here is you get a burning ember from the main fire, drops into these dry fuels, and then it starts a new little fire. And sometimes that can be the fastest way that a fire spreads, because I heard Zeke Lunder say this when I was watching his video earlier. He said it's almost like hopscotch, and that's like a perfect definition, because what it can do is drop down in the bottom of a canyon, and then it rushes up the ridge. And then you get a burning ember from that one, drops down into the next canyon, and then it rushes up the ridge. And it just sort of plays this game of kind of almost like leapfrog or hopscotch. And you can get very fast growth that way, because it's not just the fire burning forward, it's actually the winds picking up some embers and spreading that fire in another way as well. So there's our perimeter. Orange dots are the structures. Let's see if there's any fire history in this area. And we turned on fire history, but we're not seeing anything in that area. It looks like there's maybe something up here from 2014 or 2017, but yeah, it looks like this is going to be a lot of fuel that hasn't burnt in quite some time. Although one thing Zeke was talking about in his video is that a lot of these communities have been doing a lot of work to kind of do prescribed burning, make their communities fire safe, and that probably was part of the reason that yesterday, while it was extremely active around 12 to 2, didn't just continue to take off. Now, one thing I will say, though, is anytime you haven't had a fire in a very long time, there's going to be a lot of fuels there that are dry, dead, maybe even. And then when it comes to the weather forecast, it's also hot and dry. And winds are going to be something interesting to watch today. So, yeah, let's just get into the weather forecast now. We'll pick this one. I think that's the closest to where the fire actually is. You can see Nakoma Gulf right there, Portola up there. And I'm mostly interested in kind of the conditions where the fire actually is. All right, so temperatures yesterday did get up to 89. And then we did have some gusts yesterday around 25 to 28 miles per hour. The reason that's important is because when you look at the National Weather Service, it's saying just 10 mile per hour winds today. Notice it's from the southwest. We talked a lot about that earlier. But I don't really believe this number right here, because today is supposed to be windier than yesterday. And if we actually look at one of the stations from yesterday, we had gusts around 25 to 28 miles per hour. So that would make me believe that we're going to have some gusts around 30 miles per hour. And National Weather Service is saying only 10 mile per hour winds today. And at 9:20 a.m., we were already registering a gust of 13 miles per hour. And your winds are just going to continue to pick up throughout the afternoon. So I think I'm going to trust Windy when it comes. Windy, that's this website that we'll look at in a second when it comes to the winds. But this is also useful to look at the temperatures. It does look like we're going to be hotter today than yesterday. It looks like in the low 90s. And then relative humidity, that's not terrible. It's definitely dry out there, but it's not. On some fires this year, we've seen single-digit relative humidity, but we're going to call it hot and dry. One thing that has been helping us, though, look how much the humidity comes up overnight. It's around 82%. Let's actually see what it was. Relative humidity. Up in the very higher elevations, it looks like we don't have as good of a relative humidity recovery. But in the lower elevations, we do. And a lot of the structures are going to be in the lower elevations. And that maybe is one other thing I should say is working in our favor, is between this fire and Portola, it's going to have to go downhill. And fire doesn't go downhill as quickly as it goes uphill. And also you're going to have more moisture around Portola, which means more moisture in the fuels around Portola as well. So hot, dry, winds we'll talk more about in a second, but right off the bat you can already see even National Weather Service is saying tomorrow is actually going to be windier than today. This is the main wild card in the forecast, though, and I think it's the main thing I'm going to be watching this afternoon, because it's going to have major impacts on fire behavior. It could be positive or negative, because I've seen what this means is that there's a thunderstorm chance this afternoon. Now, I've seen and forecasted for fires where thunderstorms come through, drops rain on the fire, and it really helps us out. But then I've also seen wildfires where thunderstorms come through, it has gusty, erratic winds, pushes the fire in all sorts of directions, picks up burning embers, leads to new spot fires, and it can just be very chaotic out there. And it's also dangerous for firefighters. So with a thunderstorm potential this afternoon, it's a bit of a wild card whether it'll be good or bad. But it is something to notice. It looks like between 2 and 5 p.m. there is a chance for some rain, but it's also the chance for some thunderstorms. The other obvious thing that thunderstorms can do is you have lightning, and then that starts new fires, which is never good. But I think the main aspect of thunderstorms is where you get those outflow winds, which can rapidly change the direction the fire is moving, and that's just much gustier. So let's click in. There's Portola. I think this is going to be about where our fire is. And I want to actually just look at the values themselves. So this is going to be winds, or wind gusts. Yeah, it's wind gusts. I don't think our sustained winds are going to be around 25 miles per hour. But it is showing, 30 mile per hour gusts this afternoon. Notice from the southwest. So just to reiterate, what that's going to try to do is push the fire towards the northeast. And I believe that wind number more than the National Weather Service one, just because we were seeing these kind of gusts yesterday, according to that observation station that we were just looking at. So windy this afternoon from the southwest. Now let's look at tomorrow afternoon. That's one thing I'm concerned about. Tomorrow actually looks even windier. So National Weather Service was saying some gusts tomorrow around 22 miles per hour, but they're also undercalling it for the day today. So that is showing gusts around 30 to 40 miles per hour tomorrow afternoon. So hopefully they get a good handle on it today, because that's going to be some very challenging conditions. And then on top of that, so hot, dry, windy, we're checking those boxes when it comes to fire weather. And then let's look at the wild card one more time. Thunderstorm potential. I'll kind of zoom out here so you can get a wider view. There's Lake Tahoe, Bay Area down here. That pinpoint is roughly where our fire is going to be. And then that's 11 a.m. So about an hour from now, it's already showing some thunderstorm potential. Goes through 2 p.m. and then it starts to die out as we get into this evening. And according to the National Weather Service, more of a thunderstorm threat today than tomorrow. So maybe some of that moisture that's been moving up from the south is finally going to move out of California. So basically what we've been seeing on the mill fire is very active behavior yesterday, although they have been doing some great work on it. So it's going to be interesting to see how much work they're able to get done overnight and throughout the morning when we had more favorable conditions. Good news is it doesn't look like there's that much heat coming off of the fire right now, but it does look like we have a pretty challenging weather forecast. It's going to be hot, dry. There's a lot of fuel that haven't burnt in a very long time, minimal fire history. And then we also have that thunderstorm potential as well. So keeping a close eye on this one throughout the day today. Right now, I have time to record a more concise version of this video where I'll explain everything I just talked about in 1 minute, just in case you're new to the live stream and short on time. So I'll get that uploaded fairly soon, and then I'll have more updates in the coming days. So hopefully this video was helpful, and thanks for watching.